Real estate investment practice problem using Excel. Amortization table formatting. Get ready because we're raising the stakes with real estate. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet, would like to follow along, note that we have two tabs on down below, example and practice. The example tab in essence being an answer key. Information's on the left-hand side. We have our amortization table on the right-hand side, looking into some formatting issues. Now note that if you have your amortization table on the right-hand side and you're changing things such as the years here, and or you have custom payments that you possibly are going to be thinking about paying it off sooner, which are two things that you can do quite easily in an amortization table in Excel, possibly more easily, especially with the payments and the early payments, than online types of amortization tables. However, you still have that kind of problem on down below in that you can result to the amortization table ending if either you paid it off early or you're changing the terms using the same structure of the table, and you get these negative numbers at the bottom. Now, we talked about this in the past. It's not too big of a problem in reality because notice if this is a 30-year loan, it closes out after 30 years. If you want to delete the rows underneath it to customize your table, you can. But if you want to go from a 30-year loan to a 20-year loan to a 40-year loan or something like that, then you're going to want the extra cells in order to be there. So the other solution you can have to kind of clean this bottom part up is that you can try to say, is there some formula I can use that when it goes negative, it stops populating on down below? Now, again, this is kind of just a formatting issue, however, because we know that we could still calculate, say, the bottom line numbers in terms of the total payments, because that's just going to be the payments times the number of periods, 360 times the payments. And we can calculate the interest quite easily by simply taking the amount of the payments minus the amount of the loan, and we can populate that easily as well. It's going to be more difficult to do, however, if you have an early payment type of situation, then you're going to have to sum up the payments. It'll be a little bit more difficult to do. So you might want to clean that up. Now, there's also going to be some pros and cons to doing this. So it makes the table looks nicer. It makes you look more professional to have the table set up like that. But you're also going to lose the complete simplicity of an amortization table. So if you were to figure out this amortization table and pick it up and say, I want to adjust it or do something to it, you got these nice, easy formulas, which are fairly, as easy as they can be, right? In given the fact that it's an amortization table. So I can figure out what's going on in these. So if I'm going to use these if-then kind of functions, then it can make it a little bit more confusing. So you have a trade-off between simplicity and just formatting niceness as you go back and forth. All right, so that said, we're going to do this in a couple different stages. One, we're going to say, how can I get these when they turn negative to just basically be zero? Then two, is there any way I can clean up the zeros themselves to have them just show blank, possibly to make them look a little bit cleaner? And then three, is there a way that I can hide cells possibly so I can easily go from a longer to shorter table so I can see the totals at the end of the table? So those are the formats we're going to do. You could do one or two of the formats. You might not do all of them. Depends on what you want to do or how you want it to look and feel. So there's going to be, when we look at here then, first we can use what we're going to call the if-then kind of function. I call them if-then functions, the logic functions, to say, hey, look, if something turns out to be negative, then stop it there and put a zero there instead. So we could do that on the total. So when the total turns negative, we could say, hey, look, if it's positive, in essence, put the positive number there. And if it's negative, then put a zero in essence. And we also would need to do that over here on the payment so that we can say, hey, look, we want the payment amount to be the amount that brings it down to zero for the last payment. So those are the two areas we would need to put like a logic function, an if function in. So let's test it out here where it turns negative. See if we can figure out this if function, the logic function, and then we can copy and paste it throughout the loan. So it should be looking something like this. It's going to say, hey, look, if this number becomes positive, then we want you to do the calculation that you normally would, which is the prior balance minus the loan decrease. So that's going to be the cell all the way down. It's always taking the prior balance minus the loan decrease. At this point in time, the prior balance was zero minus the loan decrease makes it go to the negative. So we're going to say, hey, look, if it goes negative, then we want you to basically just keep it at 0 at that point. So how would the logic test look? Let's do something like this. We can double click on it. There's our normal formula, taking the prior balance minus the loan decrease. I'm going to put an if in front of it now, if, and then add our if function. So we want to say if that normal thing, the prior balance minus this, is greater than or equal to 0, greater than or equal to 0, then, when I say then, I put a comma for the next argument. If that logic test is true, then, comma, the value that I want to be there if true is just the normal calculation, this minus this, that normal calculation. And then if it's not true, we want you to do something different, meaning it would go into negative. If it goes into negative, I want you to stop it at 0. So if it's not true, put 0 there. We could say, okay. And then it puts a 0. If we copy it down a couple cells, you could say, does that work? Looks like it does. If we copy it up a couple cells, we could say, does it work going up? Doesn't look like it's messing anything up. Everything's still wound itself down at period 30, just like you would expect. So I would copy this then all the way down, put our cursor on the fill handle. Let's just copy this thing all the way down so that we get rid of all those negative numbers. No more negativity on our amortization table. Only positive stuff. Only positive stuff here. And then we're going to go back up top and let's copy it up then. Let's do it the other way and say, does it mess anything up that way? No. So we'll do this all the way up. You can't go all the way up to the very top, but you can go all the way up here to the 199760, and it should do it. Now, again, it kind of confuses things a little bit here when you look at this formula, but you shouldn't need to change this one very often. The payment item is the item that you might end up changing. So we want to know what's going on with this one as we put a formula in here so that if you wanted to make an extra payment or something like that at some point in time, you know how to do that without, messing up the entire thing. So if we go back down to the payment side, we could say, all right, what can I do like on this one so that it stops having the payments at the point in time where the loan balance reaches 0. So this one is referring to the cell. You can refer to the cell above it because it's just the payment all the way down. So let's start here and say, okay, well, I would like to say if this, I want to pick up the prior balance, let's say the prior balance. We want to use that because that's the same all the way down. If it's less than this balance, the prior balance of the loan at the last time period, plus the 4 here, because this 4 is going to be this plus this is going to be the balance that's going to be left. So that'll be the case to the whole life of the loan up to 30 years. In this case, 360 payments. If it's not, then we would like you to use then this number plus the interest. And so that's going to be the calculation. Let's see what it looks like. That was a little bit more confusing to think about. Let's try it again. See if I said that correctly. If we're going to say if this logic above it, that item is less than or equal to, we're going to take this number, the prior balance, plus the interest in the current time period, right? Plus the interest in the current time, which is that balance times the interest rate. If that's the case, then, comma, that's what they say when you say then, the logic test, what you want to do is take just the prior balance, which is the same balance all the way down. And then if it's not true, comma, what do you want us to do if it's false? If it's false, we want you to take the prior balance that we need to pay off plus the interest on the current time period, which you can't see, which is right there, because that's going to be the amount that's still remaining that basically needs to be paid off. So I'm going to say, okay. So what that means is it's always going to be this payment. Now, of course, if it's a normal loan, the last payment will be even. It should be basically the same amount. But if you did something funny, like you paid off early payments, then that last payment might not be the same amount because you only owe whatever's left at that last payment, which would be the prior balance plus any interest in the current time period. So that's what we're attempting to do to get it to basically 0 at that last point. So notice that this calculation is way more complex than the original calculation we had, which was simply just equal that one payment amount, possibly absolute reference, or just simply equal the cell above it. So again, adds a lot of complexity just to look at the amortization table if you were to try to figure it out from scratch, but it could make it cleaner and fancier looking. If we copy it down, does it do anything funny? Looks like it does what we would expect. If we copy it up a few cells, does it do anything funny? Does it do what we expect? It looks like everything is still working out properly. So let's copy it all the way down. We can copy it all the way down here and say, let's just do that. There we go. And then that cleans those all up to 0 balances. And then we can copy it all the way up. We can copy it all the way up top. You can't go to the first one. You can go right underneath the first one, right there. Now, you might say, hey, maybe I don't want to copy it all the way up top. Maybe I want to copy it to somewhere like within 5 years or something, because I don't expect the loan to be done before 5 years. And then I don't have to worry about this funny business on the top part. So you could do something like that if you want to, because again, if you were to change this, if you were to say, hey, look, after year 2, I would like to increase my payments to $3,000, even though I started with this 30-year loan setup. What would that look like? Well, normally I would change this payment to $3,000, but if I have this crazy formula in it, that means everywhere there's an F14, I'd have to change to 3,000 on that one cell, and then it should copy all the way down. So I would have to say, okay, there's F14. Let's change that to 3,000. And that F14 right there, let's change it to that 3,000 right there. And that should do it. And then it should copy it all the way down. And if you copy it all the way down, it looks like it's proper. Notice that last payment is not 3,000 in this case, because we did something funny. We added 3,000, making the amortization table not exactly proper. It's not an even amount of payments. And we paid it off somewhere in 8 years or so, or whatever. So if we go back up top, now to fix that, you could just copy this one down. Boom, copy it down, and it should go back. Say, does it go back to what it was before? Does it go back to that? All the way down here to 30 years? It looks like it does. Now, the next thing we can do is say, well, what if we clean up these zeros? Is there any way I can make these zeros just go away? Because if it's 0, I'd rather just see a blank cell. This is something I don't really like doing most of the time myself. I'd rather see the zeros. I don't mind seeing the negative numbers even, possibly. But again, if you're trying to impress someone, or if you just don't like seeing the zeros, you think it's cleaner without it, then we can remove the zeros possibly with formatting as well. So one way we can do that maybe is we could select, let's test it out on this row and just adjust the formatting to try to say, hey, look, if it's a 0, just make it blank. So we can say, all right, let's right click on those cells and let's go to the format these cells and say, now what you want to start with usually is to choose the starting point, which I like to say currency, and then remove the dollar signs and have brackets, no decimals. That'll be our starting point when I go down to custom down here. So I'm going to go to custom, and this information up top is basically the custom kind of format that is going to be set up. So what I'd like to do is adjust this format to a custom kind of formatting. So notice that the second one after the colon represents negative numbers. So I would like negative numbers and zeros to just be blank. So I'm going to try to say, let's just delete this entire thing and just put a colon here. And then let's put 2 colons and just represent 2 blank areas, hopefully. And then I'm going to say, okay. And now you have just a blank. And if I put a negative number there, then it shows a blank in there as well. So that's one way that you can have these things turn out to be blank. Let's put that back in. Turn out to be blank. Just use that formatting to do that. And then if I was to copy that formatting down using the format painter, and if I was to copy that formatting into my entire amortization table, then everything with zeros would wash out and look like that. If I copy that all the way up to, these numbers will remain because they're not 0. So we'll copy that all the way up. And so these ones, I think they're not exactly 0. That's why they're still there. But if you go all the way up, then we have removed everything that is not 0 with formatting. I'd be cautious on that one because like I say, I like to see the negative numbers. Maybe you want to do it just for the zeros and not the negative numbers, have them remain in case there's an error. But again, some people, if you're trying to impress somebody or something like that, and you want to remove that, or if the zeros, like you're just, they're too busy, too much busyness for your eyes when you got these zeros and negative numbers, then clean it up. So the next thing we can do, of course, is we can go back and forth and hide these cells if we so choose. So I could go down and say, okay, if I'm presenting this to someone else, I don't want to delete all these cells below, but I'd like to hide them. So I'd say, okay, everything below column 30, put my cursor on the row and drag on down, and I'm just going to hide down to the total down here. Now, there's kind of a problem that it could mess up anything to the right, but if you're this far down on the amortization table, there's probably not anything over here that's where you're really going to mess up because you're 30 years, 360 periods down. So right-click and then hide. And so there we have it, and now you got it kind of cleaned up in that format. So now if you do some changes, let's unhide that. I'm gonna put my cursor back on 362 to 483. Right click and unhide. If I go all the way up to the top and I make some changes here and change this to say 15 years or 10 years, then it should sum up and then stop at 10 years down here. You don't got all the crazy business of negatives. And I could then verify my bottom line numbers. I could hide the cells too, but I could verify my bottom line numbers all the way down here. The 254,557 should tie out to my 254,557 over here, and so on and so forth. So just some kind of formatting. Again, just remember the pros and cons of it. I kind of like keeping it simple and not having a giant if kind of logic function in my table, and unless I think it's going to be useful. If it's a formula that I'm going to be changing all the time, especially if I need someone else to change it all the time, then I would keep it simple unless, I need it. And I'm not sure you really need it in these amortization tables because, again, when it goes negative, you can see that point going down there. But in any case, there's just some formatting tricks that could be useful for it.